Welcome to the Astro Psyche. This is your weekly astrology forecast for June 24th through the 30th. And this week is about thinking things through thoroughly. We have a lot of activity this week involving Mercury in particular, the planet of thinking, communication, and analyzing things. And Saturn will also be stationing direct, which is a very important moment in the sky that we'll continue to reflect upon over the next couple of months or so. My name is Shawna McGrath. I'm a psychotherapist and an astrologer, and I'm so happy and honored to be able to share the astrology of this week with you from a psychological perspective. So, last week, we talked about moving into Cancer season with the Sun and Venus and Mercury all moving and shifting over to the sign of Cancer. We had the solstice, and we're still wrapping up our lunar cycle that began with the new moon in Gemini earlier this month on the 6th of June. So we're still within that cycle, and this week we have our last quarter moon in the sign of Aries. And so the last quarter moon is sort of like the emotional rounding of the corner of starting new things. So it's kind of more of this wrapping up sort of energy at an emotional level. So this week, the emotional context, I think the emotional context is related to the lunar cycle, but also our energy levels and what's going on in our physical bodies and the things that we feel soothed by, the things that we feel capable of taking on. There's a sort of winding down energy around that. And so I think this week in particular, it can be really helpful to this week in particular is a moment within the monthly lunar cycle where it is usually helpful to focus on doing things where you're letting go, where you're delegating, where you're deciding if you want to continue to pursue something. And it is a really lovely time for just beginning that process of slowing things down over the next 2 weeks in preparation for the next lunar cycle, to really make things easy on yourself as much as you can. There's so much that we do month to month and week to week. And when we're in the waning phase of the lunar cycle, like we are this week and next week, it really helps us go with the natural rhythm to let things go where we can, to slow things down, and to give ourselves more space to process and release. Now, what's happening in the sky with Mercury is pretty freshly in the sign of Cancer. So Mercury is the mind, the thought process, logical communication. It is a symbol of the in-between. Mercury is a planet that is about thresholds, that's about transitions. It's about being in two worlds at once. It's about occupying multiple spaces at once. And it has this sort of threshold guardian sort of energy to it. And so whenever we're thinking about Mercury, we're not just thinking about our communication process and our logical analytical mind. It is that, but it is also this symbol of how we move through change and initiation, and how we relate to being able to be and embody multiple experiences at one time. And so there's this sort of paradoxical energy to Mercury as well. So all of that's the psychic representation of Mercury that Mercury is holding for all of us. So that is in the sign of Cancer, and Cancer is a water sign, so connected to intuition and feelings and relationships. And it's also a cardinal sign. Cardinal is about initiation, starting new things. It's about the beginning of cycles. Mercury, and let's see, actually, back it up a second. Mercury in Cancer is really about occupying a fluid state of thinking about things and a more emotionally or intuitive sort of logic, that we can think about things in a way that is maybe more intuitive or maybe more feely, that there is this emphasis around thinking about things in a creative, feely kind of way. And I want us to be thinking also about intuition, not just that it is things that we think of. It's not, intuition is not just something that comes out of air or something that's a gut feeling. Intuition is also being able to connect the dots and to see the broader picture of something and to get a feel for what's going on with something without actually having to have all of the data in front of you. That when you intuit something, you're drawing on a multitude of senses, which might be your five senses, your taste, your touch, your smell, scent, sight, etc. But there's also the psychic sense, which is that there is this feeling of something. So yeah, Mercury in Cancer, there is this more fluid, flexible way of thinking about things. And so we're all getting to experience this for this month or so while Mercury is in the sign of Cancer. And Mercury this week is making a easy, flowing, harmonious trine aspect to Saturn in Pisces. And when this happens, there is this easeful flow of energy. Saturn is the planet that symbolizes containment, structure, the practical limitations and boundaries around life. It's also a symbol of our commitments and our devotions, what we're committed and devoted to, and how when we commit to something over a long period of time, that has a certain effect. There is something that is created or built, and psychologically, Saturn is a symbol of building confidence over time through doing something that we feel not confident in. And so when I see Mercury making this trine aspect to Saturn, this is a moment in time where our logical mind is really in the flow with what is practical and what is true and what is authentic. And at a practical level, this could look like having a stronger focus this week, like maybe your mental capacity is more focused. Maybe there is a need for you to focus. And I think also there's a lot of benefit here around being able to draw on the sense of confidence that Mercury trine Saturn brings. There's a certain surety here. And so I want you to remember that that is something that you can draw on this week, and that that we can relate to Saturn in looking at where we want to intentionally focus our energy and where we want to intentionally choose to devote or concentrate or focus on something. And I think that when we have trine aspects as well, it can be something that's easy to just sort of fly under the radar, that it is more soft and easy, so we don't really notice it. And so this week it is really, it's helpful that you can draw on this if you want to, but you don't have to. But it is something that's helpful around. Okay, yeah, let's see. Actually, this is just coming to me now. So if there is something in your life that you want to figure out, or you want to resolve, or you want to build or create something, this is a week where there is a lot of harmony in starting that, or even elaborating on that devotional or commitment process. And this can be anything in your life. It can be a practice, a routine, a ritual, something that you do for yourself. I think that when we're talking about Mercury in Cancer, also there is this connection to care of the self and nurturing of the self. The other piece of this too is that Mercury in Cancer, along with the trine to Saturn, it will be making a square to Chiron in Aries. And Chiron is associated with how we learn, how we teach, and how we give of ourselves to others, and the relationship that we have to helping and healing work, and how we take care of ourselves, especially when we are in a place where we are taking care of others, and the balance of that. And so Mercury making this square is sort of having us think about the ways that we are in a helping, healing function, whether that's something that you do more explicitly or overtly, or something where you're simply holding space for the people in your life. There's this theme here around your mental energy being channeled into a healing function. And because it's a square, there's a little bit of tension here. So if there is any way that you are unconsciously sacrificing a part of yourself, and it is in a way that is draining your energy, that may come up this week. That may come to your attention this week. And then this is a lovely opportunity to be able to figure out what it is that you need this week. And this is actually emphasized by the last quarter moon in Aries, which is happening on Friday, the 28th of June. So the moon in Aries is with the North Node and Chiron in Aries, and it's connecting this Chiron-Mercury square that's happening. So Aries as a sign is really about you as an individual and your thoughts, desires, and needs. And so there might be a contemplation around the thought patterns that you have around how it is that you use your time, how you use your mental energy, thought patterns around how you execute boundaries or protective space around yourself. And I think this is also, a question around what are you doing with your time? Because I'm thinking about the Saturn element here. And Saturn is a reminder that we have a finite amount of time, emotional energy, logical energy, and psychic energy, that there's only so much that we have to give. And so that is something that may come up for review. Now, Saturn will station retrograde this week. And this is really important because this is bringing us back to situations that may have come up around the springtime. So Saturn stations retrograde at 19 degrees of Pisces this week, and it's going to appear to move backwards through the zodiac to about 12 degrees of Pisces. This process lasts from this week in June until November this year, November 2024. And so Saturn is going back to the degrees where it was in Pisces in March, April, and May, so the spring of 2024. So this is themes around containment, responsibility, limitation. Saturn's also connected to contractions and pressure. Saturn is really a space holder. And I like thinking of Saturn this way because it is so much more nuanced than just Saturn being hard or restrictive or limitations or things being challenging. That can certainly be the case because containment and limitation is not always something that we want. And at the same time, containment and limitation and creating a sense of structure helps us to have it helps us to have a container to move something into a fully fleshed out form. And so Saturn actually has this creative process, but if we're not positioned in a way where we can accept that or where we can feel like we have a choice in the matter, it can be challenging. And so I don't think that I want to be clear that I don't think that this period from June through November this year is going to be challenging. I think that it is going to have themes that are sort of like a memory or a ripple or like a holograph back to spring of this year. And so I just want you to think about, are there things that happened this spring where you felt like there was taking on more responsibility, or it felt like you were coming up against limitations, or maybe there was just kind of something that felt a little clunky in your life, and what was happening, and how did you deal with that? How did that play out for you? Maybe you're still working through that phenomenon. That's actually quite possible because Saturn is a symbol of going back to that situation. And so when we have Saturn moving back to this same place in the zodiac like this, we get to revisit an issue from a different perspective. And we get to revisit an issue having had more experiences and ideally more insight and wisdom and support and a greater sense of perspective around what is actually happening with that situation. And I think that Saturn also is really about this question of how you're holding space for yourself this year. And I'm thinking as well about how Jupiter in Gemini is making a square to Saturn in Pisces throughout most of the whole year. And so these two planets are about the like it really is this contraction sort of energy where Jupiter is about expansion and growth and possibility, and Saturn is about the limited potential that we have, and that our time is precious and that we can only do so much at one point in time. And so there's this kind of navigation with what is it that you want to spend your very precious life doing. And where can you, I think also too, especially if you're like, oh my gosh, Shawna, I'm having a hard time, or I'm having this challenging transit, or something is just difficult in your life right now. When we're talking about Saturn, it's always helpful to look at where you have choice in a situation, even if it's a choice or choices that you don't like. If you can find your autonomy, if you can find a sense of advocacy for yourself, even if you're not a fan of it, if you can find that place where you are the one that is choosing, that is going to make this process much more easeful, and it's actually going to connect you into Saturn as an energy in a way that is stabilizing and grounding. And I actually want to read something for you. So this is The Astrologer, Robert Hand. This book is a collection of essays, and this particular one he wrote about handling the malefics. So he's talking about Saturn, and he says, quote, "How do we deal with a heavy Saturnian energy? First of all, it is incumbent on you to get centered. When I say centered, I mean to get a sense of internal balance and equilibrium so that you can get in touch with what is real for you." This is really Saturn. What is real for you? He continues, "What do you really want and need? Realistically, given the rules of the game, how can you manipulate things so that your needs are met? Instead of saying, I can't do it because of this or that, or saying, what will they say if I do this? Do I really want to stand out in a crowd by doing something unusual? All of these are Saturnian considerations." So I'm not super a fan of this, how can you manipulate things? Because I think that when we use that word manipulate, that has, there's a complicated meaning to that. And when he's talking about given the rules of the game, he talks about Saturn as being a symbol of the rules of the game. And so what I'm taking from this and what I would encourage for you is to look at, okay, what are your options here? What is the structure within which that you are working? And what can you do within that structure? And how can you also realize that there is also, in addition to Saturn, there is this Neptunian otherworldly aspect, that reality, the rules of the game, is itself a game, that it is not the end of everything, that there are other alternate experiences and realities, and that there is something greater than simply this material world. And at the same time, how can you figure out how to exist in this material world in a way that honors what is real for you right now in your experience, in your somatic, physical, mental, emotional experience? Okay. Let's see. Let's pull some cards. I do want to say also that Venus in Cancer will be making a sextile to Mars in Taurus. And so this is a subtle aspect. I think it's another part of this potential for finding a sense of healing and empowerment. And we're going to talk more about Venus making an aspect to Saturn next week, because Venus is also in this equation, but it's really heavy with the Mercury energy this week in particular. So let's see, are there other things I wanted to tell you? So yeah, this is really about navigating that liminal space of concrete reality, healing, and change. And I think that it's also about, because Saturn is moving into this retrograde experience, it's about looking back at what practical matters need tending in your life. And also, whenever we have a transit that's like this, like Saturn stationing retrograde, where it's the beginning of a longer term process, I think it can be really helpful to look at the week symbolically and to look at maybe what omens or synchronicities happen. The things that you notice that are sort of like a marker or a stamp that may be like a, I'm thinking about how when you get a book, the cover of the book gives you a certain feeling about the content. It's kind of like this week is like a cover of the book sort of situation. Okay, so as best you can, get into a comfortable state of experience, whether that is finding a sense of rhythmic movement that feels good to you, or a sense of stillness. And in this place, connecting to a core center in your body, finding that sense of equilibrium, connecting with your sense of something greater or divine, whether that is your spiritual guidance team or your ancestors. And maybe in this place there is a sense or a feeling or something that arises in you. Okay, so let's see here. So I'm pulling 3 tarot cards and then also a flower card for you. And I want to read you about the flower card. So the first flower card it's called a Galaga, which is very odd. And I'm going to read from the guidebook and then I'll show you the card. And it's connected to the Page of Swords. So this is the card here if you're watching the video. So yeah, the flower is called the Galaga. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. This plant is from the legume family and has been used in animal feed for centuries. It contains a lot of important proteins and carbohydrates and helps to increase the milk yield of dairy cattle, although it adds bitterness to milk. That is so strangely specific. Let's see, does it say more? So the classical meaning of the Page of Swords is about cautions, analysis, surveillance, having a sense of detachment, sometimes indecision, and receiving information. So the page tends to be, actually, it's funny because the page has this very Mercury sort of symbolism to it, because it is about messages, communication. It can be new information that you receive from a literal person. It can be a new insight, but it's usually that there is some sort of information that is given to you. The pages can also sometimes signify traveling or taking a trip. And again, this is that kind of like Mercury theme around moving from one place to another or occupying more than one place. And then the swords are about thinking, communication. So this card is very much kind of the Mercury function. And the imagery on this card, there's this sort of like viney looking plant. And so, okay, actually, so the plant in particular, the Galaga, I think it's quite interesting actually that it's associated with feed that's given to animals, because this is really and there's all different kinds of plants in this deck. This is making me think of nourishment, and especially animals that produce milk. There is this moon sort of element to it, milk being connected to the moon, and how there's this theme here around gaining information or gaining insight that is somehow nourishing to you. And I think this is also like looking for, okay, actually, yeah, this is getting clarified for me right now. So this card feels like it's talking about your internal self-talk, how you talk to yourself, how you talk to yourself about yourself, how you talk to yourself about others, the storyline about what is happening that you tell yourself. And this card feels like an encouragement to seek out influences that are nourishing for you. This idea that the things that we listen to have an impact on our internal psyches, whether that is movies or shows or podcasts or music or social media, people that you talk to, people that you interact with. This feels like an encouragement to seek out, I almost kind of want to call it like media, but like media in a very broad sense, to seek out the things that you take in, to seek out things that are nourishing for you. And the imagery in the background of this card, there's like this, what looks like a beach, sort of like an ocean in the background. Something that feels like it's calming for you. So we're going to look at the other cards and we may come back to that. But yeah, this is really about like finding having a hard time speaking. Finding information that feels like it is restorative and nutritive to you, and discerning what is and what is not. Okay, second card, or actually, okay, so I pulled 3 tarot cards in addition to that. So the first one is the World. And I actually pulled this reversed. So the World has this culmination sort of effect to it. And the World is usually a symbol that things have peaked, and it's also this sense of accomplishment and like very material world kind of accomplishment. that it came up reversed in this particular case at the beginning of the spread. This to me tells me that maybe it feels like it can be maybe that there is a sense of disappointment or deflation that you haven't achieved what it is that you want to achieve. And in this particular deck, there's this person that's holding what looks like a wand, and they're reading a book that has some writing, some text, but also some images of the elements here. And it looks like they're doing some sort of spell on this plant. And there's like a little water hose that's like giving water to the plant as well. So there's something that's being revived here. There is something that is receiving emotional nourishment via the water, and there's something that is receiving attention, and there is something that is being invoked. And the way that I'm reading this is that there is something that you want to accomplish or achieve, and right now, maybe, possibly, it feels like it just hasn't been working for you, and there's a little bit of disappointment about that. Do I want to say other things about that? I think also with the world, there's kind of this sense of you've come as far as you can with a particular scenario. And I don't always say this about the world, but I'm feeling this in this moment, that it's kind of like, okay, you've done as much as you can within this method of approach. And there's kind of like this stopping point or this plateau that has happened. And so what to do about this? And this brings us into the second card. The second card is the card of chaos. So this particular deck has some extra cards in the deck. So chaos is not a traditional card, but it is a card in this deck. And of course, chaos is about the element of surprise and unexpected. And I think chaos is really interesting because it initially maybe invokes a little bit of fear. It's a little bit scary. But it is the Uranian principle, the principle of Uranus, that things need to have spontaneity and transformation in order to have a sense of fresh energy, in order to break up stagnation. That's really what the chaos card is about. And this card actually in this deck reminds me a lot of the High Priestess energy, because the figure that's in the card, they're wearing this headpiece that is reminiscent of the symbolism in the High Priestess card. And this figure, they look like they're dancing, and there's kind of this, I don't know if it's like a scarf or there's some kind of like sash or something that's weaving around them. And they are just, like they're in this like flowy dance kind of situation. It almost looks like they're swirling. And so to me, there's something here around like your sense of wanting to accomplish and to achieve that requires a bit of spontaneity, or maybe breaking up something that has been stagnant. And I'm not quite sure what that is for you in particular, but there's something here that needs a little bit of movement. And then the last card is the Seven of Wands. And the Seven of Wands is about taking stock of your progress. So this spread is super interesting, because it's like we start with the card that symbolizes culmination, which is the World, and it feels like the culmination is like has not happened. There is kind of a stopping point or a cap on the sense of achievement. And then chaos comes in and breaks things up, and then this creates a moment for you where you're contemplating where you're at and where you want to go. The Seven of Wands is about assessing your creative projects, your creative energy, how you are spending, like linking this back to the astrology, how you are spending your time and how you feel about that and what you want to do with that. It's about really taking stock of your progress. And I feel that maybe, possibly, that's a part of the world being reversed, is that you might have accomplished and done so much, and you might have come so far that maybe you don't really realize it, that you've been doing so much that in the doing there hasn't been a moment to pause and look at how far you've come, to be able to look back. And then having this sort of fluid, free-spirited experience can lead to a sense of being able to contemplate on, where you want to go and what you want to do. And I'm linking this back into the Saturn retrograde energy too, because it is this process of looking back at how far you've come and the beauty, like really the beauty that you have created, and the accomplishments and the achievements that you've made, even when it doesn't quite feel like that. Okay, so this is your reading for this week. We're going to talk more next week about Mercury moving into Leo. We're going to talk about the new moon in Cancer that's happening next week. So excited to be able to share that with you, and so lovely to share this time in this space with you. If you want to find out more about me and my work, you can find me on theastropsyche.com. That's my website. Again, I'm a psychotherapist and astrologer, and would love to hear from you if that is something that you're interested in, if you're called towards working with me or learning more about this healing work. I am wishing you a wonderful week, and I will see you soon. Bye.